اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك العصم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشعا أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني باسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متوازيا. اللهم واسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لكبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرعت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادح من البلايا قلت وكم من إثار وكيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وافرط بي سوء حالي وكسرت بأعمالي وقعدت بأغلالي وحبسني عن نفع بعد أعمالي وأخذتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سره ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رعوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فاق الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مكرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفضعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في ساعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شتي وثاكي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذب بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من توى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهجا به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تزيا من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر هوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارها ساعت إلى أوتان تعبدك طاعية، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء مكروه قليل مكسوه يسير بكاء كثير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لعليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته. فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناتكا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها زجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولو نادينك إن كنت يا ولي المؤمنين. يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجنا فيها بمخالفته، وذاك طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يزج إليك ضجيج معمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تعلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتكه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقتوا لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كانت لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا، وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها، وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل كبيه أسررته، وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله، أو إحسان تفضله، أو بر تنشر، أو رزق تبسطه، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك الرك، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضر ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي، يا من عليه مؤولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قوي على خدمتك جواره، واشدد على العظيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لحجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأكلني عسرتي، واغفر ذلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني منايا، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النكم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Ahsantum. Let us remember the marhumeen of our families and our community, inshallah. We have been requested in particular for the marhumeen of today's sponsors to recite Surah Al-Fatiha and to pray for the elevation of their rank. Marhum Sayyid Abu al-Qasim ibn Sayyid al-Dar Ali Zaidi, Razia Zaidi bint Maulana Muhammad Miran Naqvi, Rizwana Zaidi bint Sayyid Ashwaq Hussain Zaidi, Ali Ahmad ibn Sayyid Ali Ahmad, Khurshid Banu bint Sayyid Muhammad Saeed, Mushir Hussain ibn Sayyid Bande Hussain, Rais Fatima bint Khawat Hussain, and Sayyid Jalaluddin Haider ibn Sayyid Ijaz Hussain, for all of these marhumeen and for the deceased members of your own family and community. Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha.
أيضا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. جعل معصوم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي، أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
And Eid Mubarak to all of you. Today was the 24th of al-Hijjah, and this is the most well-known date which is attributed to the event of Mubahalah, a very important event in the history of Islam, and in particular in giving us a true idea of the rank and the importance of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam within Islam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So to begin, just a little bit of the background of the event of Mubahalah. There are two events that took place in the month of Dhul Hijjah, both of which are very important in introducing Ahlul Bayt and their rank and their importance to the Muslims. One is the event of Ghadir, or Eid Ghadir Khum. And this one is well known and agreed upon in history. It took place during the return of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi from the farewell pilgrimage known as Hijjatul Wada, during the final year and in fact the final months of the Prophet's life, at the end of the 10th year of Hijrah, and just about 2 months before the death of our Prophet in the month of Safar of the 11th year of Hijrah. So this was the event of Ghadir Khum. final sermon of the Prophet in which he announced his death, and he announced that Imam Ali alayhi salam has the same authority and the same position among the Muslims that the Prophet himself had among the Muslims. The other event that took place in the month of al-Hijjah is the event of Mubahalah. And unlike Ghadir, there is not the same amount of agreement or consensus about exactly when the event of Mubahalah took place. And perhaps the reason for that is that Mubahalah, it was not just one day, but rather it was the completion of a series of discussions and debates that took place between our Prophet and the Christians of Najran. And so because it didn't take place at just one time in a very kind of specific time and place, it may have led to some differences in recording or in memories of when the event of Mubahalah took place. It definitely took place after the conquest of Mecca in the 8th year of Hijrah. But either it took place in the 8th year of Hijrah, or the 9th year of Hijrah, or the 10th year of Hijrah. All of those different opinions have been mentioned by historians. Now, if we look at the context, it makes most sense for the event of Mubahalah to take place in the 9th year of Hijrah, because that 9th year of Hijrah is known as Sanatul Wufud, the year in which the delegations were sent by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inviting people to accept Islam and to listen to the message. So this was something that began after the conquest of Mecca, and in reality the submission of all of Jaziratul Arab, the Arabian Peninsula, to the authority of Islam. Because with the conquest and the submission of Mecca and its twin city of Ta'if and all of the tribes of Hijaz, now the security and the safety of Islam and the Muslims was established, and it was possible for our Prophet to send messages to the neighboring civilizations and empires and religious communities, informing them of Islam and inviting them to Islam. Now, the 10th year of Hijrah, of course, was the final year of the Prophet's life, and the narrations tell us that the event of Ghadir, that took place on the 18th of al-Hijjah, but it was not just one day. The Prophet remained there, and it was a 3-day occasion for people to hear the message and for thousands of people to offer their bay'ah and their allegiance to Imam Ali alayhi salam. So if we look at that history, then in the 10th year of Hijrah, on the 18th of al-Hijjah, the Prophet was still in the journey between Mecca to Medina, almost halfway near Juhfa. That is where Ghadir Khum is located. And if the Prophet was there until the 21st of al-Hijjah, then the Prophet and the Muslims, they would not even have returned to Medina by the 21st or the 24th of al-Hijjah. So it is unlikely that Mubahalah took place in that very short period in the 10th year of al-Hijjah. So based on this, we can say that Mubahalah and Ghadir, they took place in the same month of al-Hijjah, but most likely not in the same year. Mubahalah took place 1 year earlier in the 9th year of Hijrah, And Ghadir Khum took place in the final year of the Prophet's life. This is the most likely order of those events. Mubahalah, although it comes later in the calendar, but it took place first during Sanatul Wufud, the year in which delegations came to the Prophet. One of the letters the Prophet sent after the conquest of Mecca was to the Christians of Najran. And Najran is south of Hijaz, on the way to Sana'a, on the way to Yemen, and it was a very wealthy and a very advanced society, even in the centuries before Islam. And in that area, there had been Christian kingdoms and there had been Jewish kingdoms that had ruled and that had spread the message of monotheism. So the people of Yemen in general and the people of Najran, they were familiar with the Torah and with the Injil. They were familiar with the stories of the prophets. And they were familiar with the message of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, but they believed that because Prophet Isa was born without a father, he was not human, but rather he was divine. And when the letter came to them from Medina, from our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the people of Najran, they made a delegation. According to some narrations, there were 60 people in that delegation, of their scholars and their bishops and their senior figures, and they came to Medina to investigate. Who is this prophet and what is his claim? And the story is mentioned in books of hadith. Our prophet, he very humbly engaged in discussion with the Christians of Najran. If our prophet had wished, then he could have shown them his military and his material power, because now for the first time Islam had spread and it had become very overpowering in Hijaz and in Arabia. But our prophet, he did not do that, and he showed them the akhlaq of Anbiya, sitting on the ground wearing simple clothing and answering their questions and discussing with them until a time came and they said that we are not willing to accept. And then our prophet, he gave them a proposal which was based on wahi from Allah. And this is narrated in the Quran, in Surah Al-Imran, verse number 61. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. فَمَنْ حَاجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُ أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ ثُمَّ نَبْتَهِلْ فَنَجْعَلْ لَعْنَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَاذِبِينَ. Now, this was a verse that was revealed, and it meant one thing to our prophet, and it meant maybe something very different to the Muslims who heard the verse. Allah says that if these people, they still wish to argue and debate with you after the ilm and the authority and the knowledge has come to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is no need of debate. There is no need to debate just for the sake of debate. Sometimes a discussion, it's not going to reach a conclusion, and you should know when is the right time to end a discussion. Once you have given your argument and you have explained yourself and left nothing unsaid, then you can end the discussion, and it is time to contemplate and to pray and to think. Don't fill that gap with empty words that are not going to have an effect. What was the alternative? Our prophet was told, invite them, that if you are convinced you are right, and we know that we are right, then let us invite our sons, our children, and your children, our women folk and your women folk, and ourselves and yourselves. ثُمَّ نَبْتَهِلْ. Then let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَنَجْعَلْ لَعْنَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَاذِبِينَ. And we ask Allah to send His curse on whoever is lying. Assuming that we are claiming to be right, then one of us is clearly either denying or rejecting something which they have a clear proof for. So this was the proposal, and it was accepted by the Christians of Najran. Now when the Muslims heard this message, they said that the Prophet is being told, فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُوا أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ. All of our children or our sons. وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ. Our women folk and your women folk. وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. And ourselves and yourselves. So they thought that this is a message that the Prophet is going to call his companions. They are the children and the selves of the Prophet, and he will invite the Muslim women, either his wives or other family members or other women folk. They are all part of Nisa'ana, but our Prophet did not do that. And this is something which is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the Christians of Najran, because it saved them from destruction. And for the Muslims, because it showed them what is the path to be saved from destruction. If they were to understand who are abna'ana, and who are nisa'ana, and who are anfusana. Because it is a general and a plural message that is being given. But it is very specific people that were chosen and that were brought by our Prophet. And very importantly, it is a very beautiful reminder to the Muslims that what we think is the source of our strength and our power, that is not actually something that is blessed or that is important in the eyes of Allah. Many Muslims, when they had conquered Mecca, they felt now their numbers and their weapons and their wealth and their physical strength is going to spread Islam. That will impress people and that will invite people towards Islam. But at the height of his power, at the height of people entering into Islam day by day and week by week, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. When people will enter afwaja, in large groups into Islam. It was in this period of Islam when we find people becoming Muslims not as one or two people, but in large groups. At the height of his power, our Prophet, he gave a message that if you want to know what is my religion and what is the product of my preaching, then it is these 4 people who are the members of my family. What you think is impressive is based on worldly standards. But what Allah has taught our Prophet is based on divine standards. And if Islam is going to spread, and if even we as individuals are going to attain salvation and success, then it isn't by those impressive and those great things that we do that the world sees, but rather the message and the sincerity that we create within our own homes and within our own families, and the legacy of love and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obedience to Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhimu salatu wassalam, that we put within our own family culture. Because our Prophet, after 23 years of preaching, he said that if you want to know Islam, then it is these people who are the members of my family. And that is a role model for all of us. The explanation of this verse, according to a narration of the Prophet's companion Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, narrated in Sahih Muslim. So we're not looking for a da'if or for a unknown source. This is in Sahih Muslim, and it is narrated by Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. It's a lengthy narration which reminds us of the animosity of Muawiyah and Banu Umayyah to Ahlul Bayt, where Muawiyah says to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, what prevents you from insulting Abu Turab? What prevents you from speaking ill of Imam Ali? And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he says, there are three things that I remember from the Prophet. And if he had wanted, he could have mentioned many more ahadith, but he just mentioned three things. He said that as long as I remember these three things, I cannot speak ill of Imam Ali. The implication is that, O Muawiyah, no matter how much you may ask, and no matter how much pressure you may put. First, he mentions the event of Tabuk, that the Prophet went on an expedition, but he left Imam Ali in the city. And Imam Ali, who was the hero of every battle, now people started to make fun of him and say that the Prophet left him with the women and children because he did not have any need for him in the battle. And that is when Hadithul Manzilah was spoken by the Prophet, that, O Ali, anta minni bimanzilati Haruna min Musa, illa annahu la nabiyya ba'di. O Ali, you are for me just as Harun was for Musa. So when Musa goes to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for miqatu rabbih, Harun is the only one who is qualified to be the successor and to be in the place of Musa alayhi salam. So that was the first virtue of Imam Ali that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas mentions. The second, he says that on the day of Khaybar, when the Prophet announced that I am going to give the flag to somebody, rajul yuhibbuhu Allah wa rasuluh, wa yuhibbu Allah wa rasuluh, who loves Allah and His Prophet, and whom Allah and His Prophet love. So Sa'd says, every one of us, we started to come forward and stretch our necks, that Ya Rasulullah, choose us. And then Ali alayhi salam, he was ill because he had an ache in his eye. The Prophet called Imam Ali and miraculously cured his illness, and then he gave the flag to Imam Ali alayhi salam. So two virtues of Imam Ali, one on the day of Tabuk, one on the day of Khaybar, and then the third thing that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas mentions is the event of Mubahalah. He says, when this verse, number 61 of Surah Al-Imran was revealed, and Allah says, فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُ أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. Then just again, everyone in the Muslims, they would have wanted to be part of that group. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas says, فَدَعَا عَلِيًّا وَفَاطِمَةَ وَحَسَنًا وَحُسَيْنًا فَقَالَ اللَّهُمَّ هَؤُلَاء أَهْلِي. The Prophet only called four people. He called Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, and Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha, and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. And he said, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. And this is important. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is quoting. The narration is found in Sahih Muslim, so its authenticity cannot be doubted by anybody in the Muslim community. Those who are followers of Ahlul Bayt, because it is narrated by many sources from Ahlul Bayt, and those who are followers of the Khulafa, because it is narrated in one of the most authentic books of the followers of the Khulafa. Allahumma ha'ula'i ahli. Oh Allah, these are my ahl. When the Quran says, invite all of your women folk, the Prophet chooses only Fatimatu Zahra. When the Prophet is told in the Quran, invite all of your children, and the Prophet invites only Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. Usama ibn Zayd was present, Abdullah ibn Umar was present, the other young companions, Abdullah ibn Zubair, were present. But only Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein were invited. And وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. Only Imam Ali was able to be the nafs and the self of our Prophet. So this is according to Sahih Muslim. And this was proclaimed publicly on the occasion of Mubahalah. The final point I will make, and this is the narration that tells us very beautifully how the Prophet proceeded to Mubahalah. It is narrated that the Prophet, he took Imam Hussein as a young boy in his own arms, and he carried him. And he gave his hand to Imam Hassan, and so Imam Hassan was walking by the side of the Prophet. And Sayyidah Fatimah Zahra was walking behind the Prophet, and then behind Sayyidah Fatima was Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. And so this, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This noble family, they came with that dignity and with that beauty all of the Muslims were observing in Medina, and all of the Christians were observing. And they had come ready to pray. And this is how Allah saved the Christians of that time through Ahlul Bayt, and He saved the Muslims if they were to follow Ahlul Bayt. They came and they stopped, and then the Prophet, he put Imam Hussein down, and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, they stood in front of the Prophet, and the Prophet, he came on his knees and he began to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the representative of the Christian bishop came and said that, "O Muhammad, we will not debate you and we will not pray against you, but rather we will make our peace and we will submit to your authority." That beauty of the faces and the sincerity of Ahlul Bayt, that was enough to convince the Christians that they would not achieve salvation if they publicly opposed Ahlul Bayt. That is a reminder for us. And as we move towards the days of Muharram, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to remember and to honor Ahlul Bayt and to commit to be on their path and to be their followers and their lovers. And may we strive within our families to pass on that love and that devotion, so that inshallah Mubahalah becomes not just an occasion that we celebrate, but also a role model for our own religious life and our practice. For the honor and for the blessings of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wa salam, please recite aloud salawat. And for all of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, and for them to remain true to the message of Ahlul Bayt, and to have the intercession, the shafa'ah, and the guidance of Ahlul Bayt, please recite a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the final salawat for the fulfillment of God's promise to Ahlul Bayt and God's promise to all of humanity, and for the fulfillment of His covenant and the appearance of the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi, a final and loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Once again, Eid Mubarak to all of you, and our du'as on this blessed occasion of Eid al-Mubahalah. So I think, Zain, you would like to recite some poetry in praise of Ahlul Bayt? Let us welcome him. Hussein. So Hussein will come forward. Let us recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Okay. पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है, सर यहाँ आकर झुकाने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है। यूं तो जन्नत की गिज़ा खुद भी तबर्रुक है, मगर नज़र मौला कहते खाने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है। इश्क हैदर का जनू कहता रहा बेलौल से, इश्क हैदर का जनू कहता रहा बेलौल से, मुफ्त में जन्नत लौटाने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है। बाद तकबीर और रिसालत महफ़िल शबीर में, बाद तकबीर और रिसालत महफ़िल शबीर में, हैदरी नारा लगाने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है। लात हम करते रहे मेंबर के हैदर की सना, दार से मतहत सुनाने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है, पंजतन के आस्ताने की अलग ही बात है।
Jazakumullah, that was very well recited, mashallah. I think it's the first time we've heard Hussein recite poetry in honor of Ahlul Bayt. So for his health and long life, let us have a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Inshallah, we will have ziyarat after Salatul Maghrib, and so we can conclude the program right now, and we'll rejoin inshallah in about 25 minutes for Salatul Maghrib.